available. The only thing is we don't encourage that because there are payers that you see are available, but you're just not going to need them because you just don't submit claims to or need them again to check eligibility for them. But again, if you wish to save them all, you could. All right, that was step one. Now, step two, before you can get information back from the payers, you must fill in your NPI information. That's something every payer requires. So let's go back into commercial. I'm going to click on Aetna. So we'll use Aetna as our example to show you how to add this information. So this on my screen, what you're seeing right now, this is an Aetna inquiry screen. The questions that you see here, these are types of questions that you'll be asked to enter in when you submit your eligibility to get your eligibility. So the field though that I really want to point out though is this one. Every payer that you see is going to have an NPI field. And what you must do is you must click this edit provider button when you're new, add in your NPI information, and then it will save it for you, and you will not need to do that step again. But you do need to add this in for each payer that you save. So let's just walk through those steps. I'm going to click on the edit provider button now, and that'll bring us to this screen. Now, when you see the plus symbol, the green plus symbol, go ahead and click on it. And then there's going to be 3 boxes. Now, I have been notified that these boxes, there should be verbiage with these 3 boxes, and they're working to correct this. So let me just explain. There's my first box, my middle, and my last. So this will be corrected soon, I'm sure, but this is what this means. You're either going to enter your provider's first name in the first box and last name in the middle box, and then put in their individual NPI in the last box, or in the middle box, you're going to enter your organization name and your group NPI. So it's going to vary by client. So let me just explain in a little more detail so that you know what you need to enter. You want to enter the NPI that the payer identifies you by. So when you're billing claims to, in this case, it would be Aetna, do they recognize you as an individual provider, or do you bill to Aetna as a group or organization? That's really what it boils down to. So I'm going to demonstrate both options. Let's say that, here's the first one. Let's say that I work for a 1-doctor office and my provider bills as an individual provider. So when we bill claims, the billing information is for, in the billing field is for the individual provider. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to fill in his name. So in the first box, let's say his name is Dr., let's say John. And then in the middle box, let's put his last name. Let's say his last name is James. So Dr. John James. And then in that third field, as I said, you would key in the NPI number, which in this case, this is the doctor's individual NPI number. I would key that in. There we go. And then all I need to do is go to my right and save it. And then it will be saved and stored in your site. Now, if you have another provider and they bill as an individual, you can click the green plus symbol again, and you can add in your next provider's name and NPI. But let me do the second example. Let's just say that I work for an office and let's say we have 5 providers. And my office, these 5 providers, they bill as a group or organization. So in that case, you're going to go to the middle field and you can key in. So let's call my group or my office, we'll call us Doctor's Clinic. So you'll key in your group or organization name in the middle field, and then you'll key in the third field, the last one, you'll key in your group NPI. Now, I am going to key in the same NPI number. I just want you to know this is the one we use for training. So it is the same, but of course, If this was an actual client, it would be different. But once you key in your group NPI, then you're going to also do the same. You're going to click the Save button on the right, and it will save that in your site. So I just wanted to demonstrate, because it's not going to be the same for every client. Some of you may bill as an individual provider. Some of you may bill as a group. Now, once you enter it, if you realized you did key something in incorrectly, there is an edit button, and there's also a remove button. So if you do add a provider, and let's say that next year at some point that provider does leave your practice, you could go ahead and you could always remove. So let's just do that. We'll just remove Dr. John James. We'll just keep Doctor's Clinic. And then once you do add that in, though, there's a blue link right here in the middle that says back to request. So once you enter it in, go back to the request. So here we are. We're back on the Aetna inquiry screen, but let me show you something. When I click the drop down, notice there is Doctor's Clinic. So it will save it in the menu for you. And as I said, you will not need to do that step again. All right, one other thing. I'm going to run an inquiry for you, but there's one other thing that I did want to point out before we do that. And that is, let me get my highlighter. I believe if most, if not all, payers will have a service type menu. So I just want to take a quick moment to point this out. When you're running eligibility, so as I said earlier, this is an eligibility product. What the main purpose of this product is for is to get you an immediate active or inactive response from the payer so that you'll know if the patient is covered or not. But we did mention that additional information and benefits will be sent in the payer's response. So why I'm pointing out this service type code menu on my right is because when this menu is available, it is a good idea if you're wanting to get something specific, or more, I should say this, if you're wanting to get information back from the payer besides eligibility that would better align with your practice needs, I recommend highly that you scroll through this menu. So if you notice, you've got your arrows here. I can just scroll through, and there is a very long list of service types that you could select so that you could tell the payer when you send back the eligibility information, please send back information pertaining to, here's an example, do you see chiropractic? Whenever you see a service type that you're interested in, you can just click it and then it'll put it at the top. So if I wanted to, and if I want to do more than one, I can select it. So whenever you see the green plus symbol and you see a service type next to it that you'd like information on, just select it and it'll pop it up to the top. Now, one thing that I do also want to mention, do you notice that it says health benefit plan coverage? Well, it always defaults to that. So if you don't want to scroll the menu, if you just want general benefit information returned, you don't have to pick a certain service type. You can just leave it on that number 30 where it will always default. And then the payer knows that you just want general benefit information returned. But if you want to add other service types like I did with the chiropractic, then yes, please scroll the menu, look at all of the available service types, and make your selections there. All right, here's what we're going to do now. I'm going to take us now to a second demo site, and I'm going to run an inquiry on that site. Give me just one moment to pull up this second site, and I just wanted to give you a visual of how this is going to look when the payer returns their response. Here we go. So here's the Trizeto website again. We're back on the home page. Remember, you can get to eligibility either from the Manage Patients tab at the top, or you can use, or if you are using, which we recommend, the workflow guideline that runs down the left side, you can also check eligibility and click it from here in the workflow. Remember, every Trizeto client can use the Run Individual Eligibility Inquiry link, which is the first link, as I said, the first link you should see. Every trizeto client has a capability to use this. And again, you're just running individual inquiries directly from our site. So let's click on the Run Individual link, and that'll bring us to, let this load in. There we go. That'll bring us to this screen. Now remember, I already walked you through how to edit your payer list, so we won't walk through that again. I just want to point out the Edit Payer List button is always going to be there and available to you in case you want to add or remove payers in the future. Now notice we already have some groups that have been saved. I'm going to click in the commercial group. Again, we have many, many other commercial payers, but again, there's just a limited amount that we've saved on our demo sites. I'm going to go ahead, though. Let's just stick with Aetna. I'll click on Aetna. And we'll let this load in, and we'll see the Aetna inquiry screen again. And this time, though, I'm going to add information, and I'm going to send some demo patient information to Aetna. So here we go. Here's our screen again. But let's go ahead and look at all of these fields. So date of service is our first field, which has already been pre-populated with today's date. We know the majority of the time when our providers, when our clients use eligibility, it is for today's services, so that's what it will default to. Can you change the date? Yes, you can. If you wish to click our calendar button, you could change the date. And in fact, I'll give you an example. What if your patient is actually coming in tomorrow or Friday, and you have information on file as to what insurance the patient has, and you want to check eligibility a little early? Well, you could move the date up a day or two ahead, and there are many, many payers that will return a response for a future date. Now, I believe what I've been told is there may be a small amount of payers that will not return information for a future date. So that means they would only allow you to check for today's date. But I just want you to know, again, if it's a couple days or a few days ahead of the patient coming in, most payers will give you information, still return information. I'm going to go ahead, though, and leave it on today's date. We already spoke about the NPI field. Again, I told you you will need to fill that in. Which we did. Now, I just want to mention this. For whatever reason, on this demo site, the Edit Provider button, remember the button that was there? It doesn't appear on this demo site, but I want you to know it will be on your site. So it just isn't here, but that Edit Provider button, if you have not yet added your provider or your group information in NPI, then you will see it. But you can see on my screen, they've already added some providers for us, so I'm going to go ahead and just select one of them. Now, at the bottom of the screen, this is where you're going to add the information about your patient. But it's something I do want you to know. When you see this search by field, it is usually going to be a drop-down menu option. So I would encourage you, when you see the drop-down menu, go ahead and look at what your choices are, because it can vary by payer. I will tell you this, most of the questions that you're going to fill in are going to be the same or very similar, but some payers do give you different options for how you would wish to search. So that's why I recommend using the drop-down menu to see what the options are and then select the one you want. Now, I'm just going to use the option to fill in the patient's ID number. So just make sure you do have the member's ID card or at least a copy of it available. And also this inquiry we're going to fill in the patient's date of birth. So ID number and date of birth, there we go. And then there is an optional field. Let me just point this out. If you see the word optional, it is a field that is not required. If the word optional does not appear, however, it is a field that the payer is requiring you to fill in. So if I do not want to include the patient's account number, I do not have to. On this inquiry, it is optional. And in fact, I'm going to leave it blank. Now we're ready to submit. And again, don't forget, in fact, let me just point this out again. Don't forget you have your, I'm going to just put the basic health benefit. You have the service type code menu on the right. Whenever you see the green plus symbol, you can click on it to add it. And again, basic health benefits, that is what it will always select by default. I'm going to go ahead now and click the submit button. And what's going to happen, you're going to see how quickly, literally, was that maybe 2-3 seconds? You're going to get a response that quickly. Because Trizeto has a connection with the payer, when you hit that green submit button, it's going to immediately run through the payer's database and then return your response back to Trizeto. So I want to kind of walk you through this because there's quite a bit of information on my screen. So the first thing I want to show you is this. When you submit an inquiry, it's going to let you know right away who that inquiry is for. So the patient or the information that I filled in is for a patient named Mary Beth. It's the ID number for the patient will appear, the eligibility start date will appear. So you'll be able to see, and the patient's date of birth, you'll be able to see a little bit of information there about the patient. Now, let's look at to my right. Let's talk about this message here. Whenever we, Trizeto, whenever we get your response, every payer, this is a requirement, they must tell us and tell you, is the patient active or inactive? So we can see on my screen that Mary Beth, for the information that I submitted, she is active and covered under this Aetna plan. Now, if the patient was not active, so let's say that maybe Mary Beth was at some point, she was covered under Aetna, but that policy was termed, then the words inactive or the verbiage inactive coverage would appear here. So it is an eligibility product. It is going to give you that immediate response. Now, one other thing that I want to mention, and you may never get this or see this, but the word rejected could also appear here. And that would mean that Trizeto or the payer has rejected your inquiry. Now, there will be a rejection message right about here that will also appear, but I just wanted you to know, if you keyed something in incorrectly or you did not key in a required field, that's why you would get the word rejected here, and you would have an opportunity to go back and correct it, however. So if let's just say, if I put in Mary Beth's date of birth, but I keyed it in incorrectly, and the payer saw that the date of birth I just sent doesn't match what they have on file, my rejection message could say something like, date of birth not matching or not found. Or if I keyed in the member's ID incorrectly, the payer could return the response and say something like, member ID not found in system. So I just wanted you to be aware of that. Now, if you ever get a reject message, here's the good news. There is, let me point this out, at the bottom of the screen, there's an edit button. So the good news is you can click this button. It'll take you back to the first screen, and you can go in and correct whatever you maybe didn't fill in or filled in incorrectly, and you can immediately submit it out again. But I did want to just mention it is possible to get a reject message. Now, getting back to Mary Beth's response, we know she's active, so that's the great news. But what you'll also find is there is a patient and a benefit tab. So if you would like to drill down into either of these, and notice these little arrows, these triangles, whenever you see them, you can click on them, and I could get additional information about my patient, Mary Beth. There's her name and her ID number, her gender, her date of birth. We even have her address. Also notice there's a group number. If you have to include a group number with the claim, maybe this would be a product that would help you to be able to identify if you have to include a group number or if there was a wrong group number sent on your claim. So there are many reasons why this product additionally can be a benefit. Now, let's talk about the benefit tab, which is to the right of the patient tab. Whatever the payer returns to Trizeto, we will show you on the screen. So whatever additional benefit information that you see, so do you see coinsurance, copay, deductible? This is something that you could drill down into. I just expanded the copay section. and you could get information on what amount of copay you need to collect. So notice there's the amount column. Maybe your patient is coming in and it's not just for a regular office visit. Maybe it's for something else and you're not sure of what copay to collect. Well, I can scroll through. In fact, I'll show you. The service type is right here. So there is maternity, chemotherapy, occupational therapy, immunizations. Here's the office visit. So I just want you to know if there is something that you're seeing the patient for and you're not sure of the copay amount, here we go. There's the amount column telling us $15 to see the office for an office visit for the, it looks like probably the primary care. If you're seeing a specialty, here it is, specialist. That's what it says. PCP is $15. There's the PCP. $15 copay, but it says if the patient is seeing you and you're a specialist, it's telling you $25 copay should be collected. So these are just little things, but again, they can be important things that would help your office to be able to verify. Maybe you want some information about deductibles. We have a deductible section that Aetna has returned. Again, the service type column will be basically towards your left, and the amount column will be in the middle. So you can see what is the patient's amount due for a deductible per calendar year. Again, depending on the service type, you can get the calendar year deductible. So there really is a lot of additional information that will be available. Here's some co-insurance information. Now, co-insurance is a percentage, and I believe that would be the percentage that the patient would owe after they meet their deductible. But you can see, depending on your service type, if there is any co-insurance or what that percentage would be. So that is how your response is going to be returned. You're just going to fill in a little bit of information about your patient. Trizeto is going to send it to the payer for you. We have a direct connection into their database. We're going to get a response for you in literally seconds, and you're going to know right away before you see the patient, which of course, that's the important thing, that you verify before you provide services so that you can avoid getting rejected claims or denied claims because you found out later that the patient was actually not covered. And of course, no one wants to deal with a lot of rejections or denials because of eligibility. Now, what Trizeto, I want to point this out, what we will also do at the top of your response page is we're going to stamp a few things, and I just want to speak to them just for a moment. So every time you get a response from a payer, Trizeto at the top, we will stamp the date and time the response was returned. We just want to make that available to you so that if you ever go back in the future and you look at this response, which you can, I'll talk about that in just a moment, but we'll always put the date and time that the response was received from the payer. The other thing we do is we give each response a trace number. Now, that can be important if you ever contact our customer service team. So if you had an issue with a response or a reject message and you're not sure what to do and you contact us, if you provide our team with this trace number, that will allow the team to know exactly what response your question is concerning, because they have a system they can key that into to know, and that way it can help speed up an answer. So I did want you to know every time you get a response, a separate number will be assigned. And then the other thing I also want to point out is, do you see at the top of my screen it says submitted by, and then it says front desk staff? Well, if you want, now you do not have to do this, but if you want to track who is running your eligibility inquiries, you could set up that employee or employees with a separate login and password to the Trizeto site, and we would actually be able to stamp that user's name or that employee's name there. Now, again, that's if you wish to track who is running your eligibility. For some offices, maybe that's not an issue or something you need to do. So please know you do not have to have separate logins to the Trizeto site. You could have one login that multiple people use, but we just want you to know when you want a name stamped here, you must create a separate login. Now, if you're interested in doing that, if you haven't set this up already, Trizeto has a help guide. It's called Manage Users, and it will walk you through how to do that. So the Manage Users guide, we do have it attached in your handout section, which is again on your GoToWebinar panel, or you can also find the guide on our website. I'll point that out in a moment as to where you can find that. But before we end this training, here's what I'm going to do. So we've just looked at the run individual eligibility response. I'm going to go back to that first eligibility screen. And there's just one more thing that I want to make sure that I advise you of, and that is when you get to that first screen, if you look a little farther down, there's going to be a link that says transaction history. And I just want you to know that for about 18 months, Trizeto is going to store and save every response you get back from the payers. So if there is a need, which maybe on occasion there might be, that you want to go back and look at a past response, click on the transaction history link and scroll down. And then on my screen, you'll see all of these search options you'll have. You could search for a past response by a submission date or date range or a date of service. Or if you want to be a little more detailed, you could just give us the name of the patient you're wishing to look for or their ID number. That's to my right. Now, I know, though, that in this demo site, I have some information I can show you from the submission date calendar. So let's fill in a date and create a report. I just want to give you a quick visual of this. And because I did not just key in a specific patient, I put in a date range for submission. Do you notice it did pull up quite a few? But what this is telling me is all of these patients, they were checked for eligibility during that submission date. So you'll see the name of each patient. You'll know whether you received an active or inactive status from the payer. You'll know what payer that you submitted the inquiry to, the date of submission, and the date of service. So I just wanted you to know we're storing all of this information for just, again, your site. And then if you would wish to do this, when you see a patient's name, if you click on the name, it does allow you and take you to drill down and go back to that. So Mary Beth was the patient that we looked at, if you remember. Well, I just clicked on her name in the response in the transaction screen. Notice what it did. It brought me right back to her response. So you can still go back and view the response or the benefit tab or the patient tab. It will still be here. All right, well, that is the eligibility product. That's how you set it up, and that's a quick demonstration of how you can run that. Now, as we wrap up the training, I'm going to pull up the PowerPoint again. Let's just do a quick recap of what we've just covered. Pull that up. You'll see that on your screen in just a second. There we go. So again, what I showed you is called Run Individual Eligibility Inquiry. It's available to all Trizeto clients. It's just something we make available if you sign up with us. And now that you've attended the training, you now know that you'll access the product on the website. There's two different ways. You can go to the Manage Patients tab at the top, or you can access eligibility from the workflow guidelines. Remember, there are two things you must do to set up the product. You do need to edit your payer list, which again allows you to see all of the payers we have available, and then you'll check the box and make your selection. Remember, you can edit the list as often as you like. You will also need to make sure, though, that you do add your NPI information in, because that is something that each payer does require. Now, there will be an edit provider button available to you. When you enter it in, again, think about how you bill to that payer. Do you bill as an individual or a group? That's how you'll determine if you enter an individual provider NPI or the group. And again, once you add it in, it'll save it for that payer, and you will not need to do that again. I also demonstrated how to run an inquiry because I wanted you to visually see how the response is returned from the payer and what kind of information that will get returned. And then you also know if there is a need for you to, in the future, to go back and look at a response you've already received, you can then go to the transaction history link, and those responses will be out there for about 18 months. Now, remember, there are help guides available. If you maybe realize, I'd like to take a quick look at that eligibility guide, or maybe I do want to set up separate users, the Manage Users Guide and the Eligibility Guide, they can both be found on our website. Just go to our Resources tab and click the Online Help section. If you find, though, that there's something that you need additional help with, then we would ask that you reach out to our customer service team. And they can be reached by phone at our main 800 number, and we're here till 6 p.m. Central each evening during the week. And that 800 number is also on our website in the upper right corner. But what we're going to do right now is we are going to leave this webinar open. If you have a quick question about the eligibility product, or you need clarification about something maybe that we spoke about, we're going to go ahead and leave the webinar open for at least a few minutes and see if we do get any questions. I don't see that we have any right at the moment, but what I'd also like to say is maybe if you don't have questions and you will be logging out, I would just like to say thank you for joining us on the eligibility training. I hope that the training has been helpful, and I hope even more so that the product is helpful. I don't know what every client uses right now to verify coverage. I know calling the payer, maybe that isn't done as much anymore, but that's time consuming, or having to log into each payer website. So I'm hoping that this product would be something that would benefit your office and just make that process of checking eligibility a little easier. So if you're logging out, again, enjoy your day. Thank you for joining. If you have a question, though, we are going to mute the phone, and we'll leave the webinar open, though, for several minutes to see if we do get any. So thank you again, and enjoy your day.